Hello, this is the 5th lesson of the Unit 1 of Snapshots from the Borders training. I remind you that this unit is all about advocacy and change. And in the previous lessons, we looked at the theory of change, implementing change, the expressions of power and the vocabulary of power, and developing an advocacy strategy. In this lesson, we are looking at the smarter approach, which is essentially an evaluation or a reassessment of your advocacy effort. The takeaways from this lesson are the what's and why's and when's and how's of advocacy and of your campaign. And then also the personality of your advocacy effort, because it's good that you look at the advocacy effort and a personality that it may have. And when we say the smarter approach, it is SMARTER stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timed, ethical, and relevant. And we would like to bring them together in pairs sometimes so that it is easier to remember them and make an assessment. When we speak of specific, now here we are going to overlap a bit with when we spoke about implementing change, because if you recall, we mentioned that mission statements are in generic terms. And so are the objectives. However, although in generic terms, they need to be specific in a way that they can be understood. The terminology, the vocabulary, and the personality of your advocacy campaign and advocacy effort must be clearly understood. You must avoid having audiences or third parties, even not involved in your advocacy campaign, who say, "What are those people about?" Your advocacy campaign needs to be measurable, achievable, and timed. And I like to put these together because together they make a marketing strategy, a technical planning strategy. When we say measurable, it needs to be measurable in objectives and therefore understood. It needs to have milestones. It needs to have impact. And this, may I recall that we went through how a lean canvas looks like, how a logic framework looks like. This is when you have measurable goals, even internally and also in the eyes of third parties. They need to know what you are about. It needs to be achievable. We spoke of imagination when we were creating the best scenario in our theory of change. However, it needs to be achievable once that best scenario has been translated to a roadmap. Once the good old friends steep V are used to tame your wild card. It needs to be achievable in general and also in the parts, because sometimes you may say, in our advocacy effort, we would like to achieve first this, first this, first this, and then the last objective. So even those three firsts need to be achievable. And then it needs to be realistic, which means that it needs to be achievable, measurable in parts, but also you need to have the resources for it. And at times, yes, you need to show you have the resources for it, because if you are lobbying for a solution for a problem, you need to show you have people with you who know what they're talking about, who know that they know why you are proposing that policy. From a legal aspect, from a social aspect, from a research aspect. So you need to be realistic. And timed. Timing is of essence. People in marketing tell you you need to watch the season, the time of day, even the hour, and what people, your audience might be doing at that time of day when you hit them on social media. And timing is in season, phase, period, mood, and milieu. You remember we mentioned the milieu, that you have to understand the mood and why people think in a certain way. So all these, I like to put all these four together because for me, if I look at these four measures between measurable, achievable, and timed and realistic, for me they fall all under the family of realistic. Then your advocacy campaign needs to be ethical because, you know, ethics matter. However, ethics needs to be at face value and even underneath, and you need to make sure that your allies also adhere to the ethical values that you had when you started your advocacy campaign. It has to be ethical in its implementation, in its aims and objectives, and in the impact it brings on the beneficiaries and on the community, And you must be careful that all your allies do not have any unethical issues or baggage in their persona or in the persona of their organization, so that you travel with a white, clean sheet in the eyes of the policymakers and in the eyes of the community. One of the most important elements is that your advocacy campaign must be relevant, because, of course, if you are living in what they say in La La Land, you have an advocacy campaign about something that is not relevant for many, it will be difficult to have ownership, it will be difficult to bring people behind you and around your topic. It needs to be relevant for society, for the target groups, for the audiences, and for the players. Because if you want alliances with you, it needs to be relevant also for them. It needs to be relevant in its mission, in its timing, in its achievability. It needs to be horizontal to the rest of the smarter approach. It is relevant in being worth the effort for yourself and for all the resources you employ. I wanted to share with you a quick note about looking at the personality of your advocacy effort, because this matches with our earlier discussions in the previous lessons on the kind of loops that you plan for your campaign. It can be an advising one, it can be an advocacy one, it can be based on activism, it can be based on lobbying, or all these four parts together in different levels. Depends on the topic, on the players, on the context. However, this is a balance between who you are, what you want to achieve, who your players are, and the audience and the target benefit you want to bring about in society. In fact, it is difficult to explain this without concrete examples. And I would share with you one example. On one side of the slide, you have the smarter approach, just to have it as a reminder. And on the other side, I propose that you look at the local integration charter and action plan for 2020. You might look at the charter, it is short, you can scan through it, and you can make an assessment using the smarter approach. You can say, is it specific enough? Do I understand it? Are the goals achievable? Is it realistic, timed, relevant? You can make an assessment of why the local integration charter and action plan, why now, why by the entity that proposes it, why with the local councils, and you can make an assessment in this way. A second example would be, just to complicate your lives a bit, you can see the local integration charter and action plan, and you can give it some context of activities under the local integration charter in a context of the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. Whether there were any initiatives that you could have framed as implementation of the local integration charter, but within the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, making action favoring integration. Maybe you could have engaged migrants who are maybe not seen positively by many in going around asking the elderly if they need any help with their shopping. Maybe they could have offered service with the brokering of the local council to the local market to make deliveries. And in this sense, this could have been an action under the local integration charter in a specific context. Because sometimes, as we said, you can have a general advocacy effort under the local integration charter, but then you seize the opportunity and you say, this is it. But you can do it because your eyes are open, because you are advocating integration. So having the advocacy mindset needs to be a priori. Then I would like to share with you another story of a campaign that did not go well. And I can quote it because it was ours. This was a European project called Precariosity. And in it, this was a youth in action project. It is quite some time ago, 7-8 years ago. The idea of the project was that young people engage with policymakers, with unions, with groups working for migrants. And the subject was precarious work as an abuse. And we had successful activities in the project, and only the last activity was necessary, which was that all the youths come to Malta and they engage with local stakeholders to discuss precarious work. First there was, I think, a local round of elections, so politicians stayed away from speaking of precarious work. Then there was the referendum, I think it was about hunting at the time, so again politicians were treading well, so we had bad timing. Now, when we planned the project, of course, we planned long-term, because unfortunately and fortunately, projects with European funding need long-term planning. However, in this case, we fell unlucky with timing, and we did not manage to fulfill that activity of the project to have a public engagement with policymakers to discuss precarious work, because they did not want to touch the subject at that time. This meant we had bad timing and bad luck. But this may happen. To make a review, so basically from this lesson we would like you to keep these two things in mind. It is how to make good choices and adopt good filters to your advocacy, and for each part of it, not only for the advocacy as a whole. The smarter approach. It is the balancing between making and jumping on opportunities, like the example of the integration charter and COVID-19 pandemic context. And I would like to give you a task, a small one, of course. I would like you to try your hand at putting the general idea for advocacy for integration of foreigners in your community in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Imagine we were still in the middle of it. You can take an example like from the solidarity meals, where foreigners got involved, many people showed more solidarity. So I would like you to put these things together in the same way that I did earlier, so that you have just one small initiative as an idea that takes both the integration charter and the COVID-19 pandemic into account. Thank you.